The cemetery was silent until my stepmom leaned close, her perfume choking the cold air, and hissed, "Emily, don't expect a cent from your grandfather's will." Her words hit harder than the wind, and the mourners gasped as if she'd slapped me. I didn't cry. I stood program crumpling in my fist and walked away before rage could break my grief. But as I reached the edge of the grave, the lawyer's voice cut through the whispers. "Actually, there is one more item left." Victoria's smile vanished. My heart stopped. What could my grandfather have hidden from her and saved for me? The March wind still clawed at my face as I stood frozen by my grandfather's grave. Victoria's venom echoed inside me, looping louder than the pastor's blessing, louder than the soil thudding against polished wood. Don't expect a cent. For a moment, I thought I might shatter right there in front of everyone. But instead, I forced myself to stare at his name, carved deep in stone, Richard Parker, 1940, 2025. To the world, he was a titan billionaire real estate mogul man of skyscrapers, the name behind towers of steel and glass. But to me, he was the only man who ever made me feel safe. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 11, Grandpa stepped in. He didn't just give me a bedroom in his mansion. He gave me a home. He gave me guidance. He gave me hope. I remember creeping into his study at night, the air thick with cedar and the faint smoke of his old pipe. His sleeves would be rolled gold watch, glinting beneath the green glow of his banker's lamp. He'd tap a chessboard eyes sharp. "Emily the Queen is the most powerful piece, but power without wisdom is destruction. Remember that." He wasn't just teaching me chess, he was teaching me life. On summer afternoons, he'd tug me outside to the garden, ignoring Victoria's complaints about peasant chores. We'd kneel in the dirt, planting roses, and he'd smile at my mud-streaked face. "The soil humbles us," he whispered once, brushing earth from his hands. "It reminds us where real wealth begins." Victoria called it foolish. I called it love. And there were the winter's grand halls glittering with lights, not for investors, but for children. Every December, Grandpa threw scholarship dinners for kids who had nothing. I watched him kneel to shake their hands, his eyes shining with pride. To them, he wasn't a tycoon, he was a lifeline. To me, he was proof that strength could be tender. Victoria never saw that side of him. She didn't want to. For her, Richard Parker was an ATM wrapped in Armani, a ticket to power she hadn't earned. I'll never forget the day she told me, "You're just baggage." He picked up out of pity. I was 16. I locked myself in the library and cried into the pages of his books. But that night, Grandpa found me, sat down, and said softly, "Don't let her words define you. You carry my name, Emily. That's more powerful than her envy will ever be." Now, standing at his grave, I heard that memory louder than Victoria's poison. My chest ached, my fists trembled, but grief was already shifting into something sharper: determination. Victoria thought she had buried both Richard Parker and my future in the same grave. She thought I would walk away quietly, a discarded girl with nothing but memories. But she underestimated the one thing Grandpa always believed about me. I knew how to fight without raising my voice. And I wasn't done. By the time I returned to the Parker estate that evening, the sky had gone dark purple clouds, rolling heavy with rain. I thought stepping through those massive oak doors might give me comfort, a piece of Grandpa still lingering in the air. Instead, my heart stopped cold. 3 suitcases sat neatly stacked on the marble steps. Mine. My initials stitched into the fabric. My life reduced to luggage. The front doors creaked open, and there she was, Victoria, draped in a silk robe, a glass of red wine balanced like a trophy in her hand. Her smile was sweet poison. "Oh, good you're back," she purred. "Saves me the trouble of sending someone to drop those at a motel." I blinked, rain pricking my cheeks. "You can't be serious. This is my home. Grandpa wanted me here." "Correction," she said, leaning against the door frame. "It was his home. Now it's mine. And you're an uninvited guest." I tried to step past her, but she shifted, blocking the way. "Please," I whispered. "It's been 1 day since the funeral. Let me stay until I figure out where to go." Her eyes glinted cruelly. "Did you not hear me at the cemetery, sweetheart? You won't get a cent, not a roof either. Your room was a courtesy. Courtesy ends with Richard's life." She set her wineglass down and pulled a manila envelope from the console table. With theatrical precision, she held it out. "Here's the agreement your precious grandfather signed. Temporary residency for Emily Parker. Terminated upon his death." The porch light caught Richard's signature at the bottom. My chest caved in. Could he really have written this? My hands shook. "You forged this," I snapped. Victoria laughed low and sharp. "Think whatever you like. But the law will side with me. And if you're not gone in 15 minutes, security will escort you off the property like the squatter you are." Her words sliced through the rain. My throat burned. My eyes stung. But I refused to crumble in front of her. I bent, grabbed the handle of one suitcase, and steadied my voice. "You think you've won, but Grandpa never lost a battle in his life. He won't lose this one either." Her smile faltered for the first time. Just a flicker. Then the heavy doors slammed shut, the deadbolts clicking into place. One by one, the mansion's lights blinked off as though she were erasing me from every corner of the life I'd built here. I dragged my suitcases down the long driveway rain, plastering my hair to my face. My car was a dented little thing compared to the Bentleys in the garage, but it was mine. As I shoved the suitcases into the trunk, I whispered through clenched teeth, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The Lakeview Inn smelled of cigarettes and bleach. Room 112 had peeling wallpaper and a buzzing fluorescent light that made my skin crawl. I sat on the faded bedspread, hands covering my face, and finally let the sobs come. "Why, Grandpa," I whispered, "why would you leave me with her?" The silence answered back until the rotary phone on the nightstand rang shrill and startling. My heart lurched. Nobody even knew I was here. I picked up slowly. Emily, a calm voice, said, "This is Benjamin Hayes. Your grandfather left instructions. He thought of everything. And trust me, all is not lost." Friday came faster than I expected, though sleep had been a stranger. Every night since that phone call, I lay awake in the motel bed, Hayes' words replaying in my head. He thought of everything. All is not lost. It became my lifeline, the single thread keeping me from unraveling completely. The morning of the will reading, I dressed carefully. My only black suit pressed with the motel iron, my hair tied back, no makeup except for a touch of lip balm. I didn't need glamour. I needed strength. As I buttoned the jacket, I whispered to the cracked mirror, "Walk in like you belong." Because you do. Hayes' office tower rose into the skyline like one of Grandpa's creations, glass gleaming steel, unyielding. My palms sweated as I entered, but the receptionist greeted me with a knowing smile. "Miss Parker, Mr. Hayes is expecting you." Those words alone felt like a victory. Victoria might have thrown me out, but here my name still carried weight. The conference room on the 28th floor smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, and a view of the city stretched endlessly beyond the windows, a chessboard of lights and steel. I took a seat at the far end of the long table, heart hammering. Victoria was already there, dressed like a queen awaiting coronation, sleek black suit, pearls at her throat, nails lacquered crimson. She didn't even glance at me until I sat down. Then her lips curved. "Well, well," she murmured. "You actually showed up. Brave, but useless." I said nothing. Silence was my shield. Moments later, the door opened. Benjamin Hayes entered silver-haired, carrying a stack of folders under one arm. His calm presence filled the room like gravity. Behind him followed two people whose faces brought me a surge of relief. Mr. Lewis Grandpa's longtime business partner and Margaret Ellis, the housekeeper who had been in our family for decades. They nodded to me gently before taking seats as official witnesses. Hayes settled at the head of the table. His voice was steady, measured, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to command attention. "Thank you all for being here. Today we honor the wishes of Richard Parker. Every word in this document was his own. My duty is to ensure they are carried out without interference. Victoria adjusted her posture, crossing her legs, exuding arrogance. I noticed her attorney sitting beside her, a sharp-faced woman with a leather briefcase. Their confidence was almost palpable, as if they were already rehearsing their victory speech. I clenched my fists under the table, the weight of every moment leading here, pressing down on me. But then I remembered Grandpa's words over a chessboard. The queen is powerful, Emily, but the queen must be patient. So I breathed. I waited. I let Hayes begin. As his voice carried over the polished table, reading the preamble of Richard Parker's last will and testament, I felt the shift of power, slow and silent, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Victoria didn't know it yet, but her throne was already cracking. Hayes's tone shifted from formal to deliberate, his eyes steady as he began. To my beloved wife, Victoria Parker, he read, I leave the residence on Maplewood Drive, including its furnishings and art. I also leave her my vehicles and all joint bank accounts held at First National. Victoria's smile bloomed, instantly smug and poisonous. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to hear her whisper, See nothing for you. Heat surged in my chest, but I stayed still. Grandpa had taught me silence could be stronger than rage, Hayes continued. His pause was almost theatrical, drawing the room tighter. Those were the preliminary bequests, but Richard Parker was thorough. There are additional provisions. The atmosphere shifted. Even Victoria's attorney straightened in her chair. Hayes lifted his glasses, then read with gravity, To my granddaughter, Emily Parker, who stood by me with loyalty and love, I leave 50% of Parker Global Holdings, including all voting rights shares and dividends. The room fell into absolute silence. My breath caught. 50%. Parker Global wasn't just a company, it was an empire worth billions. My hands trembled under the table. I looked to Hayes, half expecting to see mischief in his eyes, but he only nodded calm and assured. Across the table, Victoria's nails dug so deep into the armrest I thought the leather might tear. This is absurd, she snapped, surging to her feet. She's a child. She doesn't know the first thing about running a corporation. Hayes didn't flinch. Mr. Parker's intent was explicit. He entrusted Emily with his legacy. Her lawyer tugged her sleeve, murmuring for calm, but Victoria's voice only grew sharper. This is fraud. She manipulated him when he was weak, dying. Before I could reply, Margaret Ellis leaned forward, her quiet voice cutting through the tension. I saw Mr. Parker working on this will with my own eyes, Victoria. He was strong and clear. He knew exactly what he wanted. Mr. Lewis nodded firmly. Richard anticipated every possibility. He wasn't senile, and he wasn't deceived. He chose Emily. Gasps rippled across the room. For once, Victoria's mask cracked. Her face blanched, then flushed red. You think this changes anything? She spat, pointing at me. She may have paper, but I have the house, the money, the influence. Without me, she's nothing. Hayes's calm voice cut clean through her rant. Actually, Mrs. Parker, there is more. He placed a sealed envelope on the table, sliding it toward the center. 3 weeks before his passing, Richard Parker added a conditional clause. Victoria froze. Her eyes narrowed. What clause? Hayes opened the folder, his words deliberate. If my wife, Victoria Parker, attempts to force my granddaughter, Emily Parker, out of the family estate within 1 year of my death, then all assets previously granted to her, including the mansion vehicles and bank accounts, shall be revoked and transferred to Emily Parker in full. The words detonated. For a moment, no one moved. Then Victoria let out a laugh, high-pitched, shaky. No court will honor such nonsense. Hayes leaned back, unbothered. Conditional bequests are entirely legal. This clause was witness notarized, and he pressed a button. Recorded. The monitor on the wall flickered to life. My grandfather appeared thinner than I remembered, but his eyes fierce. His voice filled the room, Victoria. If you're watching this, it means you've betrayed both me and Emily. I know your heart, it values wealth more than love. That's why I gave Emily not only half of Parker Global, but the right to claim everything if you proved me right. Tears blurred my vision. He turned his gaze to me. Emily, You are my true heir. Carry my values, dignity, strength, compassion. If she casts you out, the estate is yours. She has no place in a legacy built on love." The screen went black. Victoria staggered, gripping the table. "You can't do this," she shrieked, voice breaking. "I am his wife. This fortune is mine." I rose slowly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "No, it was never yours. It was his, and now it's mine." The room sat in stunned silence. For the first time, I felt it not just grief, not just anger, but power, the kind Grandpa meant when he said wisdom must guide the queen. Victoria collapsed back into her chair, pale, trembling, and suddenly small. The throne she'd claimed was gone, and she knew it. The weeks that followed were a blur of headlines, court summons, and hushed gossip across every circle that once bowed to Victoria. She wasn't surrendering quietly. She hired a fleet of attorneys, all sharp suits and sharper tongues, determined to dismantle my inheritance piece by piece. They threw everything at me, claims of fraud, undue influence, even questioning my grandfather's mental capacity in his final months. Each time I sat rigid at the plaintiff's table, my stomach knotted, while their words painted me as a manipulative granddaughter, exploiting a dying man's love. But Hayes was unshakable. With each accusation, he rose calmly, peeling back their arguments with facts. Witnesses testified Mr. Lewis described Richard's clarity while drafting the will. Margaret Ellis recounted the night Victoria prepared to throw me onto the street. Doctors took the stand, confirming Richard's mental sharpness until the very end. And then came the video. The judge ordered it played for the record, and once again my grandfather's image filled the courtroom. His voice, though weaker, still carried that same authority that had once silenced boardrooms. "If Victoria forces Emily out, let this record show I anticipated her cruelty. Emily is my heir, not by pity, but by choice." The courtroom fell silent. Even Victoria's own lawyers shifted uneasily, as though the ground beneath their case had just vanished. I watched Victoria's face as the truth struck her again. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted desperately to her attorneys, but none could save her now. She rose abruptly, pointing across the room. She tricked him. She cried, her voice cracking. She poisoned his mind against me. I found my own voice steady and clear, echoing with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "No, Victoria. You poisoned yourself. Grandpa saw who you were. He gave you every chance to love him for him, not for what he owned. And you failed." Gasps swept the courtroom. For once I didn't feel small under her glare. I felt equal, no stronger. The judge's gavel struck sharp and final. This court finds the will valid and binding. All assets of Richard Parker's estate, including Parker Global Holdings, the Maplewood estate vehicles and accounts, are awarded to Emily Parker. Effective immediately. Mrs. Parker is ordered to vacate the property within 7 days. The echo of that gavel felt like thunder in my chest. Victoria collapsed into her chair, pale and trembling. The same woman who had smirked at my grief on the day of the funeral now looked hollow, her power stripped away. A week later, I stood in the grand foyer of the Maplewood estate. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colors across the marble floor. My suitcase sat by the door, not because I was leaving, but because I was returning home. Victoria passed me on her way out, dragging her designer luggage with shaking hands. For the first time, she didn't look like my enemy. She looked like someone who had lost everything because she had chosen greed over love. For a flicker of a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered her laughter at the graveside, the icy slam of the doors when she cast me into the rain. Pity had no place here. Justice did. When the last of her footsteps faded, I turned the key in the lock and whispered into the quiet halls, "I'm home, Grandpa." Later that night, I wandered into his study. His chair was empty, his book still carrying the faint scent of cedar. On the desk, neatly polished, sat his gold watch. I slipped it onto my wrist. The weight grounded me, as if his hand rested on my shoulder once more. Outside, the city lights glittered a million possibilities, And for the first time since he'd gone, I felt not only his absence, but his presence too. His legacy wasn't just the fortune, the company, the house. It was me, and I was ready. The first weeks of owning my grandfather's empire felt surreal. Reporters camped outside the gates, tabloids spun stories of the forgotten granddaughter turned heiress, and the board of Parker Global watched me with wary eyes. Some doubted me, others resented me, but all of them underestimated me. I walked into that boardroom carrying not just my name, but the lessons Grandpa had etched into me. Integrity before appearance, wisdom before power, responsibility before greed. When the chairman asked if I intended to sell my shares, I smiled steady. No, I intend to lead, just as he prepared me to. But wealth wasn't the victory, it was the responsibility. Within a month, I established the Richard Parker Scholarship Fund, granting full rides to students from families who couldn't dream of affording tuition. Standing on that stage, handing the first acceptance letters to children whose eyes glowed with hope, I felt Grandpa beside me more than ever. At night, I often worked late in his study. The gold watch ticked on my wrist, a quiet reminder of the man who believed in me when no one else did. Sometimes I caught myself whispering to the empty room, "I hope I'm making you proud." And though the walls didn't answer, the silence felt less heavy, almost warm. Victoria had tried to erase me. Instead, she erased herself. I hadn't just inherited an empire, I had inherited his legacy, and I intended to carry it forward with dignity, with strength, and with love. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any wound, but sometimes justice has a way of finding its voice, even when you feel silenced. My story isn't just about winning back an inheritance. It's about remembering that love and integrity outlast greed every single time. Have you ever faced something like this where your own family tried to erase you, but you stood your ground? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next story might be the one you need to hear.